I laid the wreath for our college. 600 people from Queen's College signed up. About just over 100 died in the course of the war. This is when the intake for Queen's was around 70 a year. And we could flick through the old books of all the photographs of them and think of a sixth of that unit was all gone. British Army had the highest number of officers' deaths compared to any other army, simply because even if it was only 4 men on a patrol, an officer would always have to lead it. Compared to the Canadians and the French, none of them used to do it. That's why I'm sure you've heard the statistic about the life expectancy. Well, life expectancy, all wounded, was 6 weeks and 4 days for a second lieutenant on the front. You've got someone like Tolkien who made it through the war, and then now he's written these brilliant books. What about all the other Oxford students who didn't make it through? What could they have contributed?
Out in Afghanistan, it could be as low as a trooper or a corporal that on the ground had to make a snap decision that could have a strategic effect. Whereas the men that were serving in the trenches were, right on my whistle, we walk forward slowly towards the German machine guns. You can see that after the First World War, even during the First World War, the Germans were certainly doing it, starting to use smaller units, crack units with specialised training. Come forward a few decades, and you've got the Second World War, where it was very much a war won at the level of a platoon or a section, who are having that mission command, that ability to make decisions for themselves without waiting for a brigade commander or division commander to make decisions for them. And that has been compounded over the century. To the point where you're working in very small teams in Afghanistan and now beyond to wherever we go next. And so I think in that respect, soldiers nowadays are expected to be much more cerebral, and that again has a knock-on effect in the officer corps, because of course if you're leading cerebral soldiers, you've got to be pretty cerebral yourself, hence the officer training course.
When the war broke out, most of them were on their annual summer camp, which was an OTC training camp. Most of them signed up from there. They were allowed to sign up at 18. They all went from 18 to out on the front. That was a 7-month training period to make you an officer, basically. That I consider something crazy, but 23, I hope by this point in my life I have the experience, and now I'm getting to the point where I'm almost off Sandhurst, where I can go actually fulfil all these things which I've always dreamed about as a kid. So it's becoming reality. The idea of the memorial and those who have died is obviously, it's humbling obviously, but on top of that you kind of feel they did their duty. You can try and somehow pay respects to them through your actions with the military. I don't think the deaths hold people back. I think if anything it kind of just humbles people for the military. It persuades them to keep going that bit further.